Sales are being canceled left and right. According to Redfin, this is the highest number of canceled sales that we have on record. We're going to talk about that today. Plus, you might be shocked at some of the appreciation that we've seen in the Phoenix metro area. We're going to look at those numbers today. So let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. According to Redfin, 1 in 7 pending home sales are getting canceled, which is the highest share during this time of year on record. Now, this is national, of course, not specific to Phoenix, but I do have some data about Phoenix that we'll take a look at. More home purchases are being canceled, especially in the southeastern part of the country. Just over 41,000 U.S. home purchase agreements fell through in January, which is 14.3% of homes that went under contract that month. That's up from 13.4% a year earlier, and the highest cancellation rate for this time of year since at least 2017. So what does this mean, and why are people canceling their sales? And so what I can assume is that it's probably a combination of a few different things. In particular, knowing what's going on in the Southeast with potential insurance issues and natural disasters, that may play a role in all of this. It goes on to say that supply is rising, demand is falling. So perhaps it's because buyers have more choices and maybe something else comes on the market that they're more interested in. So they decide to cancel. Economic uncertainty, so some fears of what's going to be happening in the economy, whether it be, affecting them in terms of their finances, a job loss, that kind of thing, perhaps canceling for that reason. And then sticker shock. Mortgage rates and home prices remain stubbornly high. Average rate in January is 6.96%. Maybe people are looking at those numbers a little bit more seriously and thinking this is not as affordable as I had anticipated. I don't know. It could be a number of things, but I wanted to see what was going on in Phoenix as well. And while we don't really have a cancellation rate here, what we can look at is the accepted contracts versus back on market. And it's really the back on market that I'm honing in here with, because this is what's showing obviously what went back on market after being under contract. So 329 for the week. This is for February 16th. So within that week, we had 329. But what, it's like, okay, what does that even mean? Well, what you can see on this graph is that as we got into January and February, this number has definitely ticked up for us. We've seen a pretty sharp increase throughout January. It's gone down a bit and ticked back up very slightly, but we are seeing an increase here in the Phoenix area in terms of number of canceled contracts as well. Now, if you look back at this graph, the little spike over here, this is June of 2022. What happened then? Well, that's when mortgage rates started to go up pretty significantly, and everything in the market changed. And so this makes a lot of sense that we saw a lot more homes coming back on market because likely those buyers canceled out of fear or maybe lack of affordability with those changes if they hadn't locked in their rates. And so that spike makes a lot of sense. Now that was at 547 for that week. We're below that, but just something to keep an eye on because we are seeing some of those canceled contracts happening here in the Phoenix area as well. Now, I talked about affordability, and a big part of that is mortgage rates, which we keep track of every single week. Rates actually have made some positive moves for home buyers lately. Good news for buyers. There's a couple of those articles I'm sharing with you today. Look at this nice little dip in the 30-year fixed mortgage rate over the last couple weeks. We have had 2 good weeks for rates. Right now, average sitting about 6.74%. So definitely below 7, staying in the high 6s, but we've seen some very positive progress for rates. Mortgage News Daily is saying rates are getting really close to 4-month lows. That as of last week, we were seeing rates as low as they were December 9th. And to see anything lower, but if rates improve just a tiny bit, you'd have to keep feeding the quarters into the time machine until reaching October 18th. At that point, it would take quite a bit more doing to extend the best in X months time frame, but no one's complaining. The average lender is easily back into the upper middle 6% range, with many of the more aggressive lenders actually in the mid 6% range for top tier scenarios. So that is great news for buyers to see some progress on rates. It's also good news for sellers because that is one of the biggest reasons buyers will start to look at homes again if they can afford it, and rates play a very big role in that. Now, I've talked about this on the channel before, but you can also find an alternative route around these rates by looking at homes with assumable mortgages. I have an assumable mortgage guide linked below, as well as a list of homes for sale with assumable mortgages if that is something that you want to check out. This latest article from Yahoo Finance, finally for homebuyers, a step in the right direction. As I was saying, inventory is improving and homes are staying on the market longer as real estate's busy season approaches. So this article is talking a little bit about that supply and demand, not even really mentioning where we're at with rates because it was written probably before all of the latest info with rates has come out, because it does say interest rates are still high as are home prices. However, it continues on to say that active listings in February were 27.5% higher than a year earlier, an encouraging sign considering that market dynamics like mortgage rates and all-in prices haven't changed much. It's a step in the right direction towards balance. Price cuts are also on the rise, and they're just talking about how that supply and demand are getting a little bit closer together. It's good news for buyers because they have more options to choose from. Even better news for buyers that those rates have come down as well. So not only do you have more options to choose from, but you also are starting to see an ease in affordability just ever so slightly. Now, I know I mentioned that you may be shocked in terms of some appreciation rates that we've seen in the Phoenix area, and I'm going to share that with you. By the way, if any of this is helpful, make sure you consider subscribing to join our community moving forward, or share this video with someone who might find it interesting. So the Cromford Report just did a report on the 2-year change in annual average dollar per square foot for closed listings. They're only looking at single family detached homes in this data, but you can see there's been definitely a front runner in terms of appreciation, which we talked a little bit about last week, that the luxury zip codes and luxury price ranges are behaving very differently than the rest of the market. But Paradise Valley has seen a 33.5% increase in their annual average dollar per square foot over the last 2 years. Now, this is a 2-year time frame. It's not like it's 6 months, but still that is pretty significant. And then you'll see that some of the more expensive cities are also in that camp. So 16.6% for Scottsdale, Fountain Hills, 15.6% increase, Carefree, 14.5%. All of those more luxury, higher end homes, higher priced homes for the most part. And then you can see where Phoenix is at 12.6%. And as this goes down, the varying cities, you can see what their appreciation rate was over the last 2 years if we're looking at dollar per square foot. Now, of course, as you look at appreciation, it can change if you're looking at median sales price versus average sales price. So there's a number of different ways to look at this. However, pretty interesting to see over a 2-year time period some of these double-digit increases. And then we have some that are a little bit more normal, like Tolleson, Apache Junction, Sun Lakes, all in the 6% range. All in all, this is showing that over the last 2 years, we've pretty much seen prices in every city, except for Arizona City, move in a positive direction. So despite some of the news that people say prices are falling or home prices have to come down, so far over the last 2 years, so this is from 2023 until now, we've only seen price appreciation. Now, we did see a correction in 2022. So getting into 2023, we were seeing things a little bit more positive as we were getting out of that correction. But over the last couple of years, there just really hasn't been too much adjustment in price, particularly in a negative direction. Now, we've been paying attention to the active listings on the market because this has been increasing. Again, good news for buyers because this just means that you have more options out there. Active listings has gone up again this week. We're sitting around 23,000 for active listings. This has continued to climb. We haven't really seen it taper off all that much. Now, if we look at the new listings on the market, last week I was saying I don't know if February is going to beat February of 2024, but we sure did. 9,500 new listings hit the market in February. Last year it was 8,430. So we definitely beat that this February. We'll see what happens in March, just starting a fresh month. So we'll track this as well to see how those new listings come in and are hitting the market. Now, with rates starting to go down, I would expect we start to see a little bit more buyer activity out there, a bit more buyer demand, which will likely start to absorb these active listings. And perhaps this trend line will start to taper off. But time will tell. We will have to see what happens if rates remain where they're at. Also, we're getting into the spring selling season for sure. So now is really a turning point to see if we're going to have a lot of that activity that we typically have this time of year. The listings under contract tells us that story a little bit more. And you can see this listings under contract is still going up. So this is effectively our buyer demand out there. Buyers are writing offers on properties, taking them off the market, putting them under contract. This has stayed pretty steady. So I think that buyer demand is there, especially now with some new momentum from a dip in rates. We'll have to keep an eye on this. Now let's take a look at the CMI. We're at 84.4, so definitely in a buyer's market throughout most of Phoenix. But this has kind of stopped dropping, and I'll show you what we're looking at when we look at every single city and the average change month over month with that. Our supply is at 94.1, so very close to getting to that normal range of 100, and our demand is 79.4. This has increased as well. So right now we're seeing demand and supply both increase, which doesn't change our overall index all that much. We still have more supply than we have demand, which keeps us in a buyer's market. Now, of course, this is the entire valley. So every city is a little bit different, but we're seeing a lot of red arrows as we look at this table overall. Chandler, Scottsdale, Tempe, Paradise Valley, all towards the top with these decreases in their CMI month over month. Still considered a seller's market, everything from Phoenix up to Chandler on this list. Then we have a few cities in a balanced market: Cave Creek, Glendale, Mesa, Avondale, and then Peoria and all the way down are in a buyer's market. We only had 2 cities over the last week that have remained positive, moving in a direction favorable for sellers, which is Goodyear and Cave Creek. But overall, the change month over month with all of these cities has actually slowed down a little bit. And this is the second, maybe third week in a row where we have seen that movement towards a buyer's market start to slow a little bit. So the average change month over month for the CMI of all these cities is negative 5.2%. Last week, it was negative 7.5%. So again, that's that slowing trend of the CMI. So we'll keep an eye on this as we start to see more demand increasing. I think we'll likely see that change in the CMI slow down a little bit, and we may start to see it eventually turn in a positive direction, more towards a seller's market. Now, for the contract ratio, we have a few zip codes that are in that hot area. This one in Chandler, as I mentioned last week, 85226. We have one in Phoenix, 85045, and then Peoria, 85381, and Glendale, 85310. Everything else remains balanced or warm as of right now. Now, the contract ratio last year at this time was around 55, and what we're looking at today is only 36.9. So we have a weaker market today than we did last year at this time. And again, this is around the time where we really start to see that spring selling season pick up, which feels somewhat delayed, mostly because of rates and prices, and we have seen an increase of listings coming to the market this year already. So it's been a little bit harder for buyer demand to catch up with that. So we'll see what happens over the next month. It's going to be very telling if we get into the spring selling season. If you are a buyer or a seller, you're considering making a move one way or the other, set up a discovery call with our team. We can help chat with you about what that process looks like, when to get started, and our advice based on the market conditions in your area. I will see you guys next week for another market update.